This program on investing under regulation crowdfunding is not investment advice.
Rising with the crowd, power unbound, change makers lead where hope is found. Superpowers for good, shaping the fate. Investors and dreamers open the gate. Super Crow stands loud, proud and true, building tomorrow for me and you.
Welcome to the Superpowers for Good show from the Super Crowd. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I would like to welcome all of our new audience members today. Our audience has been growing so rapidly. I recognize that many of you are watching for the first time. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you. We hope you'll be back every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern to watch the show. We create just some of the greatest content with some of the greatest people, change makers who are making such an inspiring difference in the world, and you'll have an opportunity to meet them. I'm really excited today to introduce you to the founder and CEO of a company called hūmNET that is really doing something so innovative to connect human beings around the planet in a new and inspiring way. Stick around. You don't want to miss this. Darren, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you.
Hi, Devin. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, this is going to be a great conversation. But you're doing something that is really unlike anything I've seen in tech before. Tell us about what you're doing with hūmNET.
Well, I like to say that we're trying to build the World Wide Web of empathy. We've all got these devices in our pockets that promise connection. And in some ways, digitally, we're more connected than we've ever been. And yet, with the loneliness epidemic and isolation and just what's going on in the modern world, we feel less connected than ever. So hūmNET is really looking to solve the problem of how do we help people feel connected more deeply around times in their life, to simply focus on a hope, a need, a struggle, a prayer. And what I like to say is it can be small and infinite. So let's say something's going on with mom, and what are the options now? You can field all these texts, you can hop on a Zoom call, people could call, but it's not soothing, it's not comforting. So you could create a hum, praying for mom, thinking of mom. And the hope, once we build the full V1, is that you'll be able to see as glowing beacons on a map who's there thinking of mom at the same time. So we call the singular event a hum. So you can schedule a hum for 5 minutes and invite your family and friends. And there's a little glowing ball that circles the words. So you try to keep your thumb on the ball. And there's a gentle vibration that increases as more people join. And there's a soothing sound that's immersive and keeps you fully present. And so for 5 minutes, you see, oh, there's my sister in San Francisco, there's my cousin in Australia, there's 12 people, glowing beacons, thinking of mom at the same time. And it's infinitely scalable, right? So let's say my daughter is worried about climate change and she's standing in front of the post office here in Vermont, and it's cold and she's getting splashed by, the slush as people pass by and wondering, does anyone see me? Does this make a difference? Now imagine Greta Thunberg felt that way. Now we have hūmNET, so my daughter and everyone's daughter could join the Friday climate strike hum, and it's infinitely scalable. So we see, there's 87,000 others here thinking about climate, and that's super empowering. And then there's an after hum screen where folks can get more involved, where you can learn more or do more or extend your engagement with it.
Yeah, it really is, I think, a beautiful app. I have downloaded and installed the beta app on my phone and tested it out. And I can see how this is really a powerful thing to really focus your full attention on a subject, whether it's family, whether it's climate change, whatever it might be, you could focus your attention on that with a collective and just feel in a fairly literal way that connection. It's really an inspiring thing. How did you come up with this? What was the driver that brought you to this place? It's so innovative.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, a few things go into it. One is just kind of philosophically wrestling with the tragedy of the commons idea and what would happen? Like, how can you help people feel that sense of empathy for complete strangers or for other people? I've been around a long time. I took a class in college called Nuclear War and Its Prevention. And I think that's where I was introduced to this idea. But we were all walking around thinking, War Games was the most popular, with Michael J. Fox was the most popular movie. And thinking about, oh, God, how could we be so stupid? How do we get people to just feel more deeply connected? How can we just recognize that we're all the same? So I've been thinking about that problem for like 35 years. And then with my other startup and doing things on the internet and seeing the back end of the Shopify store, there's this map. And if you send out an email blast, you see, 12 people are looking at my website at the same time, and they show you a map. And it just dawned on me that if we bring that sneaky marketing behind the scenes stuff out into the front and create and use that as a tool to build empathy, we can then show who's thinking the same thought instead of shopping for the same pair of shoes at the same time. And then another piece that goes into it, I was the creative director at Tree Free Greetings, a greeting card company, for 15 years. And I was the chief creative. I come from a creative background as a playwright, screenwriter, among other things. And, so creativity can take you so far in terms of writing. But at some point after 12, 13 years of just trying to be clever with sympathy cards, with Mother's Day cards, and it dawned on us, we have never asked a single mom how she'd like to be acknowledged on Mother's Day. We've never spoken to a grief expert about what people actually need to hear. And so we decided to start doing research, and we surveyed and interviewed and spoke to thousands of people and started building an empathy database. And it was just so fascinating. And I think the work of building that empathy database and everything that I learned about how people actually want to be acknowledged around all of the struggles wasn't something that we could accomplish in greeting cards in a meaningful way. And that, I think, led to just my passionate commitment to pivot to building hūmNET full time.
Yeah. It really, I think, is a touching and beautiful thing that you're working on. You made an interesting decision in this world. I get excited because crowdfunding is growing and hundreds of millions are raised every year, usually in relatively small amounts, right? That, we're seeing this $100,000 at a time. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been raised, thousands of offerings every year. Very cool. But it's still a tiny fraction of all small businesses, a tiny fraction of all the capital flowing to businesses. How did you decide to raise capital from the crowd?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're pursuing more traditional avenues, and we have a commitment from actually a regional fund here in Vermont called the Green Mountain Accelerator Fund for $50,000 as part of a pre-seed round. But, my COO had said early on, what do you think about crowdfunding? Because hūmNET is so much about community in general. And normally I wouldn't recommend taking a crowdfunding route, but there's just something so organically intrinsic about what hūmNET is. And raising money from the crowd. So that was in the back of my mind. But I've done a Kickstarter campaign for my chair. This is totally different, regulation crowdfunding for equity. And I had looked at WeFunder and I'd looked at Start Engine, and I saw that, the barrier to entry was pretty high. And then I met Dorian Dickinson, the founder at Funding Hope, and he was doing something that really struck me as being different and interesting. So Funding Hope, which is a fairly new crowdfunding platform, is aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so I'm a rural founder here in Vermont, and that's one of the goals. But also, just more broadly, when you look at, I think, all 17 of the SDGs, hūmNET in some ways just supports the types of other companies that would be working towards meeting all those other goals. And that just seemed really appealing to us. Also, some of the feedback that we were getting from VCs was a little bit confusing, because we would hear, on the one hand, we think you guys need to raise $500,000 and we consider leading this round, but we're really conservative and traditional, and can't you just launch now with what you have and start showing some revenue? But we think you need to build the full V1 of the app before you launch, because this is going to be viral and scale really quickly, and we don't want it to break. So we were really trying to juggle all that confusion, and thought, let's see if we could de-risk some of that and quiet some of the noise that we were hearing from VCs, and use just the crowd as part of the traction signal for investors.
It makes such perfect sense, where the whole point of the app, I mean, I hate to draw the parallel, but the obvious one is Facebook, right? You're building something that brings humanity together, I think, in a more constructive way.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't provide the forum for us to hate on each other like Facebook turned out to do, right? I think back in 2007, we all thought, oh, Facebook will bring about world peace. We'll all be connected together in one human family. And all it did was sort of divide us into teams.
Right. And I make the distinction between social media and social connection. So hūmNET, the dream of hūmNET is that it will be a social network and it'll be a social connector, but that it's really not about social media. And then one of the other distinctions is, I think, as a founder, you get the question, how are you going to monetize? And so we see hūmNET being a freemium app where it'll be, so if I invite you to that hum for mom or that hum for the Friday climate strike, you can join that hum for free. You can download the app, you can join that hum for free. But we see going from organizers to participants, and have a lot of interest. Some of the folks that we have LOIs from and are talking to early on are recovery centers, departments of mental health at universities. There's a huge mental health crisis on campuses, right? And we have interest from directors of counseling at a university. We can charge a $500 subscription to a university with 5,000 students. And then, one of the challenges is, and you can go look at, Penn puts out the Collegiate Center on Mental Health's annual report, and you see what's ailing college students. 70% are struggling with anxiety, and then, stress, eating disorders, substance use, and down and down. So we see partnering with subject matter experts on, I was just talking to a founder last week who's an expert in eating disorders. So she would create hums that are specific to folks struggling with an eating disorder. And then we have a catalog of hums that the university could then subscribe to. So, well, what do I get for that subscription? You get access to this library of hums. And as we scale, we have data, and we'll know which hums
Great.
actually help people the most. And we'll have like biometric potentially data also around, if you have an Apple Watch and we have a plugin for that, and we can know which hums actually lowered your stress level.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. That's fantastic. Well, listen, we got to take a quick break here. Um, Everyone, I'm so excited to have the opportunity to share with you my conversation with Darren Mark, the founder of hūmNET. This is an inspiring tool, and on the screen now you can see a URL, s4g.biz/hūmNET. If you visit that, that will redirect you to the Funding Hope crowdfunding page for hūmNET, and you can learn more about the company and the offering. So I invite you to do that. We'll be back to talk to Darren about his superpower in just a minute, so stick around. You don't want to miss this.
Download a free copy of How to Make Money with Impact Crowdfunding, the book Sarah Hanks describes as
a fantastic overview, not just of crowdfunding investing, but of investing in general.
Andrew Savikas raved,
"This book offers unparalleled insights for anyone looking to make a difference."
Scan the QR code to get your copy.
Ready to take your small business to the next level? Honeycomb Credit empowers diverse entrepreneurs by connecting you with community-driven funding. Build customer relationships, amplify your brand, and grow with those who believe in you. Honeycomb Credit, where your community invests in you.
Scan the QR code to start today.
Join the Impact Crowdfunding movement. Get Superpowers for Good, your free daily newsletter with exclusive video replays, a podcast, and the latest investment opportunities open to everyone. Join the super crowd. Scan now so you can learn to make money while you make a difference.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Darren Mark. Darren is the founder of hūmNET. It's a great company, really connecting the world. But we're going to shift gears away from hūmNET to talk to Mark about his superpower. Stick around. You don't want to miss this. Mark, or
Darren.
excuse me, Darren. Sorry. We're thrilled to have you, and we're so grateful that you'd make time for us. You have accomplished some cool things. You've had your whole creative career, your peace building career, and now you've launched into this successful tech career. What is your superpower?
It's a great question. And I've been struggling a little bit with how to answer this. I think it's a recipe, and maybe there's different parts to the recipe, because I think it's one part fearlessness or audacity. I don't know if it's fearlessness or stupidity, and one part persistence, and then sprinklings of resilience and sensitivity and compassion. So you tell me, Devin, which of those should I expand on?
Well, I think this is, it really is an interesting collection of skills, but maybe we could zero in on what we might call that courage, the audacity, because I think there is, all of us need more of that. And so if you've got some of that to share, we'd love to hear it. And maybe you could share an example, a story where that courage, that audacity, that fearlessness came into play, and you were able to accomplish something that is challenging because you leaned into that fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, at my last job, as I mentioned before the break, as creative director, my joke was I was the CFSO. I was the chief of figuring shit out. And some of that just comes down to everything that wasn't anyone else's strength. I just roll up my sleeves and say, well, I'm pretty sure I can figure this out. And some of that is also having been around and knowing I was the kid that took apart the stereo with the hope that I'd be able to put it back together. So I'm pretty good at breaking things and then figuring out how to fix them. But I think a couple examples of fearlessness. One that comes to mind is my previous startup, which was for the Sprung chair, and I did a Kickstarter campaign for it. And we weren't getting the traction we needed with the campaign, and I drove to Kickstarter headquarters to try to get them to look at the chair, and they wouldn't let me pass the lobby. But as we were driving through Brooklyn Heights, I saw Mark Cuban out of the corner of my eye get out of his limo, and I hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night. I was pretty sure it was him. I pulled over into a bus stop, grabbed the chair from the back of the car, ran down the street, and went up to Mark Cuban and said, "Would you like to sit down?" And he was like, no, I'm good. And I went to hand him a flyer, and he was like, "No, thank you." But his limo driver was standing next to the car, so I handed the limo driver one of our flyers. And 2 weeks later, I got invited to Shark Tank. So that's what, and I was so busy with my day job that I turned down Shark Tank, actually. And, one of the things that I have learned is it's incredibly hard to have a startup and a full-time job. So that's why I pivoted full-time to hūmNET.
That's great. What a great story. That just so perfectly illustrates that superpower. I really appreciate you sharing that story. That's a great story. Now, I want to shift gears just a little bit. I would like to ask you to give us some tips, some advice for being courageous. I would struggle mightily. I don't know. If any point in my life I'd have been willing to run up to Mark Cuban with a chair and a flyer and invite him to engage, and it worked. Holy cow! It worked. An invitation to be on the show. My gosh, it worked. How do you do that? How can we be more like Darren Mark?
Well, I don't know if anyone wants to be more like Darren Mark, but I think it really comes down to what I learned when we were building our empathy database, what I've learned, just being a human being. And I think the insight around the desire to do hūmNET is that we're really all the same. I think I'm probably misquoting Malcolm Gladwell when, his father gave him some advice when he left for New York, which was never underestimate another person's insecurities. But I think it just comes down to, never underestimate another's person's desire to just have human connection. And if you're not a jerk, and if you approach most people with an open mind and with respect, and can even ask a question like, "How are you? What's going on?" Acknowledge someone's humanity. I think that just walking up to anyone isn't that hard. I do have another example, Devin. I don't know where we are in terms of questions, but
yeah, we probably don't have time for another story, but I appreciate that. Any final tips for us quickly?
I think if you can find a way to make people laugh, if you can find a way to just connect or engage, and also if you can just be vulnerable. So I find, even in my pitches to VCs and with anyone, don't be afraid to ask. One of the things that I had to learn, and it took me a really long time in life, I think one of my other superpowers is being able to figure out how to do everything myself, but that's also a weakness. So learning how, and especially in this founder community, what I've discovered is it's incredibly generous and it's really a beautiful community. And most people end conversations with, "How can I help? What do you need?" So I try to end every conversation with, "How can I help? What do you need?" When I tell people about hūmNET now, I try to end the elevator pitch with, "Who in your life could use a hum?" And that's profound, because then I hear just these profound stories, so I asked someone that at a conference, and they said, my best friend's sister died recently, and she's walking around wondering why all the flags aren't flying at half mast, and she could use a hum probably every day. So I think, just finding that opportunity.
We're out of time, Darren. I apologize. We're out of time.
No problem.
But really appreciate you being on the show. Let me remind everyone, you can visit fundinghope.com and look for the offering, or just go directly to it at s4g.biz/hūmNET. Darren, we're so thrilled to have had you on the show. We wish you every success with the offering and with the tremendous, brilliant, innovative business idea you've created to reconnect humanity.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you. Now let's do some good.